the gavel.
Look at him.
I don't need the gavel.
Okay, I'm gonna hire him. Look, we have to.
6 o'clock. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Planning Commission for the City of Saratoga Springs. Today is Thursday, March 14th. It is 6 p.m., and we're going to start with our Pledge of Allegiance. We've asked Commissioner Sandra Steele if she would lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Let's have a roll call, starting on the east side. Chris Karn.
Sandra Steele.
Brian Chapman.
Kirk Wilkins.
Ken Kilgore.
Troy Cunningham.
Bryce Anderson.
Kayla Moss. Nora Shepard.
Dave Stroud.
And we have a quorum. This is a public meeting, so we're going to open up public comment now. If anybody has anything they'd like to come forward and talk about that's not on the agenda or not public, we invite you to come forward at this time. I wasn't sure. He was kind of leaning like he was ready to get up. Okay, so since there isn't any public comment, we'll close public input at this time, and we'll move on to item number 4, work session, Camp Williams presentation. Who are we turning the time over to? Nora Shepard.
But you let me talk. Right. Is it on?
You should be on.
Okay.
Nope.
Put the pen at podium.
Oh, engineer? Okay. Still not on. We got it. Don't touch the button. Okay. There we go. Yeah, that works better. Not that I really need it, but do you want to
Which one do you want to go to first?
The study?
Which
The
one we had open? This one?
Yeah, let's show that one first.
Right.
Maybe. Okay, go to maybe the beginning so we can just look at the cover page. Okay, I know this is really hard to read, and I will be putting a copy of this. I will be sending you all a copy of this after this meeting. But this is a joint study that was done with Camp Williams and adjacent communities, and this was done back in 2012, 2013. And at the time this was done, there was a technical committee and then another committee, an advisory committee that was set up in the communities that worked with Camp Williams to come up with this compatibility plan. And you probably know that it exists, but may not have had an opportunity to take a look at it recently. And now that we seem to be expanding more in the direction of Camp Williams, we thought it would be a really good idea for us to just become aware of this. And then Paul Raymond is here with ACUB, and he can explain to you what that is here to just give you an update. We have some images that we'll project, and then he will talk about those. So I'll send you all this information tomorrow morning so that you'll have it all. In case you have insomnia and have issues, then you can take a look at it. Some of the maps are kind of hard to read, but that's why Paul's here, to try to help explain what they are. There's lots going on these maps. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
And Paul, you can use that clicker there to go back and forth on the slides.
Okay, thank you. My name is Paul Raymond. I'm the ACUB program manager at Camp Williams. ACUB is an acronym for Army Compatible Use Buffer, which is a program that we have to create compatible use around Camp Williams. The JLU study was done in 2012, and in 2015 we completed our application for the ACUB program. That allows us to receive federal funds to actually purchase land and purchase easements around Camp Williams. So that's a little bit of a history about the ACUB, but I'm here at the request of General Smith. He was out of town and couldn't make it, so he asked me to come here tonight and present this information to you. But I wanted to start with...
Let me, so you gotta switch back here.
You want to start with the ones you just sent me?
Yes.
Let me go back to, don't touch that, let me go back to here. Okay, now the cursor's on that, you should be okay now.
Well, this
Okay,
is just
there
a
we go.
study.
Yeah, I need to go to the map on the binder. But I wanted to give you just a brief history and show you some maps. The Matrix group actually did the joint land use study of Camp Williams. It wasn't the military, it was a completely independent group. And they did work with all the local communities, including Saratoga Springs. You had members on that team. But
There we go. Is that where we want to be?
there we go.
Okay.
So there's the map of the original ACUB area. There's a map of Camp Williams, and that kind of shows you the study area that was done. Okay, this next map shows our artillery firing points from Camp Williams. A lot of you have seen camp, you've drove past it, but this is going to be I guess a good little some insight into what we actually do out there and where we do it from. And so those are the different firing points for field artillery. We have the 200 series, which is right down in the lower corner next to where the Wildflower 2 development is. We have some other firing points that are up closer to where Mountain View is going to be going through. And it shows down on the lower left, those yellow areas are all firing ranges. So those are machine gun ranges, live fire ranges. The one that has the red lines through it, that's the demolition range. So that's where they blow up anything big. Hand grenades and big shape charges and you name it. They blow really big stuff up there. This one here, this overlay here is the airspace for Camp Williams. The military actually owns this airspace from the ground up to 10,000 feet. Everywhere there's lines on that map, even outside Camp Williams. So above 10,000 feet, the FAA owns it. We sometimes when we shoot artillery rounds, we have to call the FAA and they have to move planes so we don't hit planes when we shoot artillery because they get way up above 10,000 feet. So, and just to note with this airspace, but there's no drones allowed to be flown in this airspace, like none, because we fly aircraft in there all the time. And so how do they enforce it? I have no idea. But all I know is that's a rule that goes with the airspace.
Do you have a problem with powered paragliders?
What's that?
Powered paragliders?
Same thing.
Do you have a problem with that, though?
If they went flying through there, yeah, it would be a problem. We have aircraft out there almost every day flying. And so if they see them or they spot them, they would just turn them into the FAA and they would go after them.
We have a couple of hospitals and that are coming in, and one of them has a helipad.
Yes.
I was wondering how does that, I guess that gets coordinated with the pilot and someone else, but how does that work with, because it looks like there's a south portion of the airspace that kind of comes close to.
Right, and that's actually an approach. And these approaches, there's two kind of long, narrow necks. That's where they usually come into the airspace, or the egress or ingress from those points right there. And so once they get in there to the airspace, if they needed to get in there for any reason, they could coordinate that with Camp Williams, with range control. I don't think it would be an issue. They try and support all the civilian activities however they can.
All right, thank you.
Can we just do open forum and ask questions on this, or are we waiting?
You know what? I will take any questions that you have.
Well, so another question about your airspace.
Yes.
Oftentimes we see helicopters outside of that airspace.
Yep.
Does that mean they're above 10,000 feet at that point? This morning I had
7
6
a.m.
Chinooks fly over my house at about 1,000 feet and it woke us up.
You know,
Twice, yeah.
it shook us all up, or woke us all up, because I live down in Legacy Farms. I live in
Yeah.
Saratoga.
So it came right over your house, then came right over my house.
Yeah, it did, and I jumped out of bed, and I was, they were extremely loud.
I was on my way to work.
And they should have been above 10,000 feet.
That was above 10,000.
But I don't think they were.
No.
I don't think they were either.
They were about right at our house level.
Yeah, they shouldn't.
Are they from the base?
Negative. No, the Chinook helicopters, the Utah National Guard does not own any of them. Now, they may have been here from another state supporting some of our units. My guess is that they probably, if I was to speculate, I'd say they had some of our Special Forces units on board and they were going out to do a jump or something like that.
That's what I thought.
And so.
But do they operate out of here or do they go to the airport too?
No, all the aircraft come out of airport too.
Okay.
But they use Camp Williams to do their low-level flight training. I know if you've been up in that area, you'll see them. They'll fly really low up through the. I've been driving out there in my truck, and they've scared me to death. I know they do it just for fun, but they'll buzz right up behind me. And
The timing of this was perfect with this morning's alarm.
I was as alarmed as you were that they were flying that low at that time of day, because the Utah Guard is very careful about notifying when they're going to be doing activities that are going to be around the public, artillery shoots, aviation activities. So they're usually good about coordinating with the city. So that was, I have no idea. I don't
Okay.
think,
I like it, so.
Sound of freedom.
That's right. I actually don't hate it. So.
I think some people may call it the sound of freedom unless they work graveyard and they're trying to get to sleep. They might call it something else. But. So that's the airspace. This map here represents the noise impulse that comes off of Camp Williams. So those are the main areas that noise escapes. Those lines there are kind of a routine 80 decibel lines. And it doesn't really present any hearing loss. It's not going to damage anything, but it's just going to be maybe something like sitting in a noisy restaurant type of noise where those lines are. And I've got another map that'll show some intermittent noise that's a lot louder.
Right, we get howitzer noise all the way down on the southern end of the city too.
Yep. I think it was last Saturday, there were some large blasts, and it was a really stormy day. Those blasts were actually coming out of the canyons over in Provo from doing avalanche control. When you guys will see if the cloud cover is really low, that sound will just travel right along that cloud cover. And so the sound, if there's no clouds, it'll kind of go up and disperse. If there's clouds, it'll just follow it. One time we were shooting guns at Camp Williams in, I think, 1989, and we were knocking dishes out of people's cupboards over on the east bench because there was a really low cloud cover and it was just falling, it was just rattling those houses, something terrible. And so weather conditions play a big part in that. So this one here is the noise. They say MCA, it's military compatibility. And so the Matrix group said that, basically that we should try and keep light out of those areas to enhance training. And so that isn't our light coming out, that's light from the city coming in, and that was their recommendation on trying to keep light out. Obviously, this is not the case all the way around Camp Williams. This was, the JLU study is a recommendation. Cities could do what they want. We're in no position to dictate to the cities what they do on anything, so. This map here is our current ACUB map. The areas that are in dark green are properties that we've already encumbered, either through easement or fee simple purchase. We have, right now, I believe we have about 2,200 acres that we purchased, and we're working, I think Monday we're closing on another 328 acres, then we've got another 600 acres we should pick up in the next little while. Since this program was approved in September of 15, we've received $23 million in federal funds, and we have worked with landowners and other groups and got another $10 million to provide matching funds. The federal government will provide up to 75%. We have to come up with the other 25%. And so all those ones that are colored, though, either red or the lighter shade of red or green, are approved areas that we can spend money. And so we feel that if we can encumber these areas, that we could protect the training mission out at Camp Williams in perpetuity without any degradation to our training. And so that's why those are designated, and there were some that were designated before that we have lost, and anyway, that's where we are currently.
If I one comment. It's really hard for me to see here, but the little on the right, the lower right, where it's that dark color, that is the Springs approval, and they have an existing development agreement. And we are working with Wildflower. They have purchased that property and are bringing it into the Wildflower development area. You will be seeing an amended community plan for that. And during that process, we'll be meeting with ACUB and with DAI and the other investors there in Wildflower to discuss further some of the findings of this study and then how we move forward. Thank you.
Isn't part of the ACUB, the purpose of the ACUB is to not only protect the base, but at one time they were talking about they wanted a trail all the way around the base. And
That is correct.
okay. And I noticed that you have all of what was the Springs in the darker orange. Are you thinking you want to purchase that, or just the so many feet?
So where the Springs was, we met with the Romney and his group way back when they first purchased it. I know the complete history behind it being designated as a prison and making the top 6 list and everything else. It's now in the hands of Nate Shipp. I'm not sure what his development company is called now. I think he sold DAI, so I'm not.
They're still calling themselves DAI.
Are they?
Camelot Farm.
Oh, okay.
So they're DAI or TPS.
So Nate is the first one that's actually come to us. He got an appraisal on the property, and he came to us and said, we would like to, obviously we're interested in all of it. We feel it's all important. We have to work with willing landowners. We don't dictate anything. There's no, we don't try and coerce anybody. It's just a program, and we work with willing landowners. So he went and got an appraisal on all of it, and he just presented us with that appraisal last week. And that's the first time anyone's really came forward and said, hey, we're willing to work with you. Here's the appraisal. That's the good side, and I really appreciate what they've done. The downside to it is by far the most expensive property that the U.S. government has ever tried to purchase. And I called our folks back east, and they said, are you kidding me? And I said, no, it's just what land's going for out here. And they don't pay that anywhere. Not even in Virginia, they don't pay $150,000 an acre for land, for raw ground that's undeveloped. And so.
Welcome to Saratoga Springs.
And so he's made us an offer. We're going to meet next week. We've got folks flying in from Washington, D.C., and we're going to, as a team, we're going to look at it, and we're going to try and prioritize where we need to spend our funds. We would have to put all of our funds for probably the next 5 to 6 years into just doing 130 of those acres. The total price for all of them was upwards of like 69 million. It was a lot. And so just the top portion that we've discussed from day one, and there's about 110, 12 acres, somewhere like that. It was in the 16 million range or something. I'm not trying to share any, but it's a lot. And if we can do it, I would like for us to be able to do that and work with him, but he's only offered us a full market price on it. He hasn't offered anything less, but that's good. But it's good that he's willing to at least offer us something, because it's never been done before. They've always just pushed us off, and I've seen no less than 8 different maps for this property in various configurations of what about this, and what about this, and what about buying easements, and I'm like, we just need to come up with a value, and so he did have it appraised by a legitimate source, so it is what it is.
I hope that you can get at least a trail through there so that we won't have a big hole in a regional trail.
Right. So, so this area, this map here is kind of important. This map here is the Sentinel landscape map. So last year, the state of Utah designated everything within that big circle as the West Traverse Sentinel landscape. The Sentinel landscape is a designation that goes to land that is important to protecting military functions. There's only a few of them in the country, and it takes more of a holistic approach, more than just the ACUB. It takes into consideration wildlife. It takes into consideration habitat, and for us, it also takes into consideration recreation and wildfires. So we have talked about putting a trail all the way around this. The state appropriated us $1 million to put towards this project this year in this current session. And we do want to get a trail all the way around Camp Williams, but it's not just for recreation. It's also to provide an additional layer of fire protection and to allow emergency vehicles to get up into, especially the hills over on the Harriman side, where there's no access right now. We want to make certain portions of that trail wide enough to get up in there. We're going to do an update on the J-Luce, where hopefully we can get water up on that side of Camp Williams as well, and put some hydrants in and some other things to protect the homes down on the Harriman side. And there's wildfire issues down on your side as well. I mean, it's not just limited. There's just more vegetation on the Harriman side. There's right where those properties are of DAI, we have an old gate that we have sent General Burton sent a letter to the city asking to protect that gate, because we use that gate to go in and fight fires, and it's right in the middle of their down in the, I don't know, I don't have a pointer here, I don't think, but right in the very far southeast corner, there's that little notch that comes down. Yep, right there. We have a gate right in there that we would like to try and protect, just to get firefighting equipment up in there, so it doesn't come down into your area. And we have a really good fire fuel mitigation program right now. Ever since they had the fire that went down into Harriman, we've been grazing cattle and goats out there every spring, and it's worked very effectively. We haven't had any fires. But anyway, that's the Sentinel landscape, and it encompasses a lot of communities. We have a committee for that. They get to decide how to spend those funds that come in from the state. I believe Councilman Porter is your representative that sits on that committee. But we would like to bring the trail all the way through there. We've already discussed that if we have trouble with any landowners, if we have to, we would try and bring it on Camp Williams and bypass them if we had to. We've talked to UDOT. UDOT's agreed to provide a trail on the side of Mountain View all the way over to Porter Rockwell, so we can connect that portion of the trail. And I know that with trails come maintenance costs and lots of other things, but we intend to do this trail where it's completely self-sufficient through private donations and other means. So we're not asking, it comes through there. We would love to have support from the city and from your Parks and Rec folks to help us plan the trail through this part. Maybe you want to have a trailhead over on this side. I don't know. We haven't really discussed that portion yet, but we would love to do that. And And so we're just getting going on the trail committee. So if you do have someone in mind that you would like or you'd like to get involved with it, we'd love to help. And this one just shows yes.
What's the time horizon on that trail?
What's that?
The time horizon? What are you looking at?
You know what? Right now, they are just doing GIS study, and so they're just trying to find the right place to try and put the trail, and then we're going to work on right-of-ways and easements to try and do it. So it's very early. They haven't engineered it yet or anything.
Okay, so several years at least then.
It's going to be, it would be several years, and it's probably going to end up being about a 42-mile loop.
Okay.
It's going to be a huge loop that you could get on, hopefully out in West Canyon, maybe somewhere here in Saratoga, over at Porter Rockwell, and a couple of locations along the Harriman side.
Correct.
Where you could jump on and off and do different activities. Facebook is coming into Eagle Mountain, I guess, and one of our partners on the ACUB helped them get their land out there, and they have said they would like to donate a considerable amount to the trail as well, just to invest in the community and do some other things. So I think that we can pull some resources together to get that done. We don't want to do anything if the cities don't support it. I'll be honest with you. It's like, but everyone's expressed interest so far. We just haven't had a chance to talk to everyone yet. This map here just shows the impact area. The biggest dark area is where all our munitions end up. So no matter where they shoot them from, they land and they end up in this area. It's called the impact area, and that's where there's unexploded munitions and you name it. There's some bad stuff out there. It's not a good place to go wander around. But that's what that is, and it's a ways away. The round circle, that's where our ammunition supply point is, and that's the safe surface danger zone for that, and it doesn't reach into that property there at all.
But I heard safe and danger in the same title. Which was it?
Well, whenever the military describes something, they call them SDZs, and that's non-communicable. No, I'm just kidding, but it's they're called surface danger zones. And what it is whenever they have a weapon, it tells you what the safety areas are for that weapon or for a blast or something along those lines. And so that's how they refer to it. But like if the ammunition supply point blew up, that's where it would be contained within that circle. So it wouldn't go out into that neighborhood. This one here is the other noise contour that I told you about. These darker red ones are, and these are intermittent noises. They're not consistent. These are going to be when there's aircraft in the air or when they're shooting artillery. But that's where that noise is going from those. So the darker ones, you know, can cause serious hearing damage if you don't wear earplugs. And even the orange is, I believe, 110 decibels or higher, and that will, you shouldn't have that for more than like 30 seconds, I believe. So this right here again is the airspace and how it affects that parcel right there. And right here, so this one here is the firing points that are right next to where Wildflower or where the Springs is. There's artillery firing points all over there. This map shows the SDZs for those firing points. And we have adjusted, we've eliminated some of them. Some of them, the noise and the danger used to go right through that property. And we have adjusted all our firing points so none of them go through there anymore. So if there was a house up in that far corner and we fired, it's not gonna affect the house other than the noise. And so there's no danger to any residents up in there. So that was our main concern is getting rid of it. So we're trying to mitigate everything we can on our side. We've moved firing points. We've adjusted them. We've tried to, try to do pretty much everything that we can. Our main supply route going out to the firing ranges goes right along that property. It's called Watts Road. I don't know if any of you have ever been out on it. but it gets a lot of travel. So the other things we're doing is on Watts Road, we do dust mitigation. So we treat that road with magnesium chloride every spring. And so there's like no dust comes off that road, which is really nice. And we've moved, let me see, talked about the trails.
Is Watts Road open to the public?
It isn't, but you know what? If any of you ever wanted to go out and take a tour, I would take you anytime you want to go.
What we really need to do is to witness the howitzers and feel the decibels, because we really don't understand from your graph. I concur. Up here, it's not doing it for us.
If it's something that you really want to do, I'll set it up.
I'll entertain a motion.
No, this is important things. I know a lot of your council members have been out there.
Right.
In fact, I think, yeah, Shelley Barsh about jumped right over the top of me when they fired the first time, but it was, that's what I used to do. I did artillery for years and years, but I could absolutely set up an artillery shoot out there for, I don't know what would be the best time or
Daytime.
So if it was during the middle of the week at noon, 1 o'clock.
We may have to move things around so we can accommodate.
Okay, but no, I would love to do that. The landowners that own that property, Nate Ship, I have taken him out and let him see the howitzers. I've done everything I could to try and educate him on what we do out there in a nice way, and just say, you know, you don't want to put a house there, you just need to be aware of these things. And what's the largest house you use for artillery? The largest ones we have are the Paladins, and they shoot 155 millimeter, and that's normally what they shoot out there. It's all 155, and it has a range of about 22 kilometers, but out there we're only shooting about 10 or 12. They don't shoot very far out there.
So at 22 kilometers, do you use meteorological data as well?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, artillery is interesting because everything you can think possible is figured into a bullet being shot from here and landing here.
The rotation of the earth?
Rotation of the earth, humidity, temperature of the powder, the temperature of the barrel. All those things affect how hot it is. And they can usually get one to explode within 10 meters or within 10 meters above the ground or hit the ground or whatever. It's a pretty exact science. They've been perfecting the art of figuring ways to hurt people for a long time, I guess.
We'll send you our addresses so we can be picked up by these helicopters that we heard this morning. Just kidding.
Those Chinooks are definitely not ours. I don't know whose they are, but yeah, they come through here every once in a while. Yeah. They're C-47s, and they fly really fast, and they're loud. Some other things I was just going to say is, for us, this is our concerns is on some of this development is the complaints. It really comes down to the complaints. We know we're not going to hurt anyone, but the complaints tend to affect public opinion on when we can train, when we can shoot, and that degrades our ability to train soldiers. And everybody in the Utah Guard that's been in for 5 years has probably been deployed 2 or 3 times, and it's dangerous, and we lose people. And the skills they get at Camp Williams either bring them back or not. By the time they leave here and go to a MOB site, they're already trained. They don't get extra training. Everything they get out here. So the other thing is, and these are just anything that you can do as a planning commission to help perhaps move the density down lower away, we think would help the complaints. Don't know that's a fact at all.
Hey, Nora, are there any, up in that area where Ship has his property, or is there anything recorded on those? Or will there be something recorded on those so people know where they're building next to?
When we get to that point, most definitely. And these are all sort of moving parts right now, and an application has been filed for an amended wildflower plan to include this, and that will continue to morph as the negotiations with ACUB happens. So we're still kind of in the early stages of deciding money and where things end up and what kind of densities we're looking at. But if and when those move forward, certainly the plats will have notifications, notes on them that say,
SDZ.
Yeah, well, and how in your face is that on a recording on a plat? Does someone have to really look for it?
yes.
Okay, so it's
I mean-
on there, but the average person
Isn't
who
gonna
may
look
not
at it.
know the camp is shooting guns right behind them is gonna look at it, and so it's up to their real estate agent to help identify that.
We can make it bigger. I mean, it's something that certainly, you know, we can request that they have the notes stand out more than the normal notes.
It could be like the agricultural notice, you know how.
Yeah, so it's like, it would be like that.
Yeah, 'cause-
But again, usually that's in the fine print. But something this significant in terms of
I mean,
potential impact.
you could move in from out of state into a new build, and your first day, you're gonna think, what the heck is going on? So I'm just thinking how to protect future residents
Big
from.
sign says blasting
And
zone.
that has happened in Eagle Mountain, that exact thing. Someone bought some property right up next to our Tickville gate, and we were firing, it was within a week, and we got a call, and they found us and said, we were told that you guys didn't train here anymore. What is going on? And we're like, we don't have any place to go. This is the only place we train, and sorry. But I think that you've hit on something really key, because I think if people move in and they understand what's going on there, they're less likely to be offended by our activities. And
Well, if you buy knowing, that's one thing, but if you don't know.
I can give a real life example at March Air Force Base. Got to go on several of their junkets, and the pilots would say, you know, we have to jog over here. Well, why is that? That lady down there is always calling. And it got so bad, and through a lot of things, we lost the base in Moreno Valley, California. And it was because that people had encroached, and then they blamed
The base.
Air Force.
And we don't take the position that we were here first. You know, the president designated this ground in 1913 for training, and we don't think that we were here first and so tough. We want to try and work with the community and try and resolve any potential conflicts, and anything we can do, we're willing to do to help. Because you know what, there's a lot of growth everywhere, and I don't know that any place in the country is growing as fast as it is around Camp Williams. And so,
Well, yeah, so I recommend the staff, you know, because there's that notice, the agricultural one, where there could be smells and sounds and we can't do anything about it. And maybe that's also included for those areas that are close that may be impacted. And it's still fine print, but at least it's there, and this, you know, and it's required for the developer to provide that to the, you know, when they sell the lots. So that might be a good idea.
Is that put in a separate part of a title report?
I don't know where it shows up on the Tyler report, but I know, I mean, maybe, I don't know.
they really need to be aware of the airspace issue, so they don't all of a sudden
Yeah.
start flying drones around and have our Apaches flying around and put one of our Apaches down, or then land on a house or something catastrophic. And something like that could happen if, you know, and it could just be some 12-year-old kid that's just out playing and having fun, and he might even think it's fun to chase the aircraft or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, in the interest of time, we're going to let you finish your
Okay.
presentation, and then if we have
So-
other
Questions? I had another
Okay.
question. You mentioned that ACUB doesn't enforce or require, it just recommends like the light or like the dark sky type of thing. So we have a development that's coming in at Beacon Point, I guess, and they had said that they want an exception to the dark sky ordinance. And is that something that the city deals with, and does it really impact you since you're only making a recommendation, or does it impact you?
It's the recommendation from the joint land use study. And so the city signed on, every city has adapted differently to it. And so it's really up to the city how to deal with those things. If they give them a waiver for something, then it's going to affect us in some way, and then we're going to have to adjust in some way. Obviously, if there's nothing given or changed, then nothing. But it is what it is.
Right.
We're trying to be good neighbors with everybody. The only thing I want to say last is, I know we get blamed a lot for a lot of blasts that come off that hill, but on the other side of this property, you've got some serious mining going on, to where they have projectiles landing on the road on SR 73, to where they have to shut that road down when they're blasting, because they've got rock fragments and stuff landing over there, and they're going both sides. And so I don't know if this is supposed to go in after all those hills are completely demolished down to nothing. I have no idea, but if you're studying noise and some other things, you might want to just look at what's going on the other side of that valley. So it's kind of crazy.
We have mentioned that to the builder.
Yeah, and and their dust, they have a lot of dust that comes out of those quarries, PM10, and so. But anyways, that's all I have. And
Okay.
When this document first came out, there was talk that on the noise issues, and the consultants were concerned about hotels, motels, schools, going into that area around the base I'm sorry, I didn't get a good look at the noise contours. What is the feeling now?
I think that a lot of schools and stuff are probably more compatible than residential areas up in that area, because the noise isn't significant all the time. It would be periodically, but maybe just out of those sound areas, And that's what we'd like, is we'd love Saratoga to grow like crazy up through there, but just, with as much compatible development as possible, would be beneficial. Anything medium to high density right on our fence is going to be a problem.
What would you say is a compatible use? What is a buffered use?
Recreation, cemeteries. Cemetery would be great up in that area, What's that word? Office warehouses, light industrial would be awesome. Anything along those lines.
And what are we currently zoned for in the perimeter of that base?
On the Springs area?
Mm-hmm.
There's
Wildflower has high density in there, medium and high density.
Yeah, there's several designations.
What about the electronics that
Residential.
was also, there was a concern of, at least with the motel, that there would be so many handheld devices that it could affect the electronics on your firing or weapons.
Yeah, I don't think that would be a problem.
Well, and when they first came out with this, that was one of the things that they talked about.
Yep, that makes sense to do that. But I mean, you would have to have a considerable amount. Now, if you put a cell tower up in there, anything vertical like a cell tower or anything, that would pose a problem. Solar panels and the reflection and the glare is a problem up in that area. There's a lot of things, but I don't think that you could have enough cell phones in one area of the building that would affect.
They gave us the example of Las Vegas.
Oh.
And that they've had to shut down because of the racetrack.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. Now, from the racetrack, they operate on different frequencies than like cell phones. They operate on frequencies that can actually go right into a cockpit of an aircraft. And that would be the same up here if you had a big race. They had the same problem out at Miller Motorsports Park out there with the airport was close by, and they were running all the race operations on these frequencies, and it was messing with the planes out there. But those are different than what cell signals are. So I think you'd be okay on that.
Nor, do we have these maps that, are they public?
I have them, and I will send you, I'll put them in a Dropbox or send them to you via FTP site.
Okay. Are these public? Can they be shared with other
Absolutely.
people? Okay.
Absolutely. Most of those maps that I showed today are in the JLUS document, which is, it's a public document.
We have the JLUS on our website, the study.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, I want to thank you for your time and appreciate it. And if there's anything that we can ever do to help you in any way, we'd love to do it. And I will work on getting that artillery chute put together.
We'll take you up on that.
Yep.
Worth it.
You know what? I'm going to do you one better, but I'm not even going to tell you. Anyways,
Okay,
that's all I have.
Okay, sounds good.
Right, well, thank you for your time.
so much.
Chinook ride, I guess.
Okay, let's move on to item number 5. This is a work session, discussion of city code, title 19.02. Who wants to introduce it?
That, as you recall, you wanted to kind of take some time permitting, to go over the chapters of Title 19. Yes.
Before we start, let's set a time limit on this, because we could go forever.
Sure. Up to you.
Normally, on a normal weeknight, a normal planning commission meeting, we allotted, what, was it 15 minutes?
Right, but tonight was set aside for this,
Right, so what do we think? What do we propose we do for tonight?
no longer than an hour and a half. I mean, we really need some time on this.
And we can use more than one night.
Yeah, I would agree with that. 8:30?
Sure. Just a minute.
Are we going line by line, like definition by definition, A's, B's,
Probably not.
C's?
I don't think so. I think we're gonna, anything that you've read and you want to look at.
Okay, I was just curious what the format is.
Are we going to have Kevin in here for this
Okay.
discussion?
I do think Kevin should
I
be.
talked to Kevin, he should probably be in a little bit, but. Okay, so let's, at the most, we're just gonna put a cap. We may go less, about 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
Work? Okay, back to you.
Well, this is actually your call. You wanted to go through it, so I think we should just start with what have we got up on the screen here. We can scroll through them. If you guys want clarifications, you want, whatever you want to discuss, this is coming from you.
I have a list that I was concerned about. I wonder if anybody else does.
I do.
I've read,
I don't need to go line by line. I don't think.
so I think we just address the ones that there's questions on, because I've read through them.
So we just take, each commissioner go with their notes, and, some of your questions obviously may be answered then by another commissioner's
I say let
comments.
Sandra start.
We
She
could do
probably has the
that.
most
We could do
extensive.
that, or we could just scroll through it, and if you had a question in the one there, then we could.
Is Kevin coming back? Is Kevin coming back?
Kevin, yes, he will.
Okay.
So you're suggesting that we just go through it?
I would, because, and then if you have a comment on one of the ones coming up, we can go fairly quick, but then you're not scrolling back.
Yeah,
The S's
then we're
and
not jumping
the-
all around, and then we can discuss it as we go. I had a question on number 2,
Okay.
F. Accessory building, it says, does not include storage containers. By excluding that as part of the definition, does that eliminate
You
your
cannot
ability
use
to-
storage containers as an accessory building.
Even if you
As
cover it with
cool
a-
as they look,
Hmm?
as cool as they look, we don't want them.
And even if you contain it in some kind of stucco or something that looks better?
At that point, you're changing it. I assume if you were to face it or to frame it with whatever, 2x4s, and sure,
Roof
then
on
you're
it.
not looking at a storage container.
Okay,
Would somebody do that? Who knows? But I think at that point, you're probably changing it, yes. But
Okay.
just to have someone come drop off a
Pod.
pod or a Hanjin shipping container to use for storage
But-
will not work.
big boy in your backyard. Okay.
Okay, and this is for one that's not in there yet, but will be. The accessory dwelling unit, I think I heard the council give directions on how that should be.
Yeah, I've actually got, well, they approved a definition, but right, and we're still going to tweak it, just we had to get something in there. I've actually got the draft of an ADU code already that we're reviewing as staff.
Okay, now, the state is kind of getting in there. Have you read 34 in the last 24 hours?
I have not.
Accessory dwelling unit means a habitable living unit added to, created within, or detached from a primary single-family dwelling and contained on one lot. And this is where I wish that Kevin was in here, because he usually wants us to go by the state definitions.
Right, and that's something I've just made a note here. We'll go look to see ultimately tomorrow's the last day. Today was the last day.
Today, and at 4:11, I checked it and it was still in there. So.
Yeah, and so we'll have to look ultimately to see what was formally approved, and if we need to change our definition, that'll certainly be our next step.
And I know one council member isn't going to be very happy, but it's okay.
Okay, let's go. Let's keep scrolling. Okay, I had a question about applicant. Are we on 13 yet?
Yeah.
Okay. It says here in the definitions that it's saying that it has to be the owner of the land, or it has to be somebody who has been in contract or has permission from the owner of the land to come in as an applicant. Haven't we seen applications come in of somebody who's not in contract or is not the owner, and they're just looking to do some kind of ROI to see if they want to purchase this land?
One of our requirements is that the applicant or the landowner has to sign the application.
Okay, so you filter that on
Yes.
the way in. Okay, that was my question.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Before we jump all the way into each definition, is there any, like we just named one kind of, like we go with the state definition. I'm just wondering, like, are there certain principles or overarching guidelines that might influence my questions or comments about things? And I don't know what those are. And I don't know that there are any that do exist. Like, are there certain, I don't know, like I've looked at Spanish Forks Code, I looked at Lehigh's definitions, I looked at Provo's definitions. Some are very fleshed out, large, and the other one in the next city is 3 lines.
You'll run the whole gamut of definitions. You know, there's kind of some base definitions people may access, but then tweak it as they see their needs.
And I guess my question is, like, where do you err? Like, are there certain ways, like in I don't know, where we want to over-define or under-define, or are there certain principles that we should adhere to? So when we hold a definition up, we can look at it with this lens of principles and say, this is why it is or why it should change. Do you know does that make sense? What I'm saying? Anyway,
Did you get my email about this?
I did. I looked for our book and I didn't find one. I tried to find one from college and I couldn't find that either.
Okay.
Commissioner Steele, Kevin is back. Would you like to address your question?
Oh, I was just saying that I know that the council talked about ADUs and the definition for, and the legislature has gotten into that, and they have given a definition that as of 4/11 today was still standing in a bill that is, I would think, is going to go through, the affordable housing, and it gives a pretty clear definition. Do we follow the state's definitions, or can we make our own?
I'll have to look at the statute in the bill. Not always, I mean, it's not always clear what we can do. Sometimes they preempt what we can do. Sometimes it's just in the case of a default, this is the definition.
This is SB
So
30.
just depend on the language of the bill.
SB 34, and that was in their definition portion of that bill.
That's been such a moving target, I haven't been following it a whole lot, so we'll kind of wait to see what happens, and we'll do
You'll
whatever
know.
the legislature tells us to do. But yeah,
You'll know
there's a
tonight.
good chance that that will get passed,
And that is,
and the moving target.
the definition is right at the front of it. Okay, that's all I
Okay,
have.
yeah, I'll take a look at it, thank you.
All right, keep going, David.
Oh, you guys are good.
Going back to agriculture, we said, we exclude mink operations, and we get really defined where you say this excludes mink operations and feedlots. I forget what it was. It was under agriculture, but it was under, and I guess that's my question is like, we get so minute on the details. Does that play to our advantage or disadvantage?
Well, in the case of agriculture, and Kevin could probably speak better to this, there's some state standards which define what truly is agriculture. And so we would have to at least minimally cover those.
I just wonder, like, if we're a little bit, if there's ever ambiguity when you say, here is the definition, and it doesn't list everything that is and everything that is, and you say, this is the definition, and if there is a question, then the tie goes to us. We defer to our judgment, not.
Yeah, I mean, if you look here in our definition, under A and B and C, it just says, field crops include, among others. That keeps the door open to, you're not limited just to by what those specific items are labeled as.
Okay.
From what I understand, the applicant, it goes to the applicant if there's a discrepancy in the code, or if there's, am I wrong? That's part of our training.
Well, he's asking whether or not there's a discrepancy between state law and city code.
No, not
And-
either way.
no?
Either way, discrepancy
Okay.
between us and
If-
state, or discrepancy between us and an applicant. If there's any ambiguity, where do we?
Well, in law school, there's a whole, series of courses on conflicts of law. So I don't know that I could answer it on the spot like that, but it's something that would bore you to death. But if this typically when in Utah with land use ordinances, the state code does not preempt us except for things that they specifically state they're preempting us. So the state code is there kind of as a default, and then we can regulate that on top of the state code. So it just depends on the subject matter. But when it comes to an ambiguity in our code, and a property owner wants to come in and grow marijuana plants, for instance, and it says other crops, well, that's maybe not the best example, but if it's something that's not
Thanks for advertising, by the way.
code, if it's something not enumerated in the code, then we basically have to default to the developer's request or the property owner's request.
So like if the accessory, like we say storage containers, it doesn't include storage containers, but some guy wants to live in like the cool tunnel, like those big corrugated steel tunnel things that he puts on. You're like, well, it's not a storage container, but it's not a brick and mortar building either. It's this thing
If it's a dwelling, there are standards for dwellings, height, square footage, finished area, materials.
And that's the other thing I noticed in some of these other city codes, they got really minute, and they said accessory dwelling unit can't extend above 12 feet, or has to be this or that, and we're not necessarily on either side. We're not too ambiguous, and we're not too defined, and I just was curious what the...
And we do have standards for height for accessory buildings, so we do have that in our code.
It's actually in part of the definitions here.
If you think there's an ambiguity, then the planning commission should direct planning to go ahead and fix that. Because, it's better to say exactly what you want rather than leave it up.
I guess that's the answer to my question right there.
Interpretation, because one of the things too we have to be very careful of is there are laws out there that say, or there's cases out there that say you really can't hang your hat on simply saying anything that's not specified in the code is prohibited. You really can't do that anymore. One day, it used to be that would fly, but it just doesn't anymore. Because there's a lot of case law that says you have to give property owner the benefit of the doubt. If we're not specifically prohibiting it, it most likely is permitted. So yeah, any ambiguity there, if you're noticing that, planning needs to fix that.
Okay.
You got something, Commissioner Steele?
Yes, and it's to read that one and then look at number 66.
Read which one?
66 and 45.
45. Cemetery means the use or intended use of land for the burial of the dead and dedicated for cemetery purposes, including columbarium, crematorium, mausoleum, and mortuary when operated in conjunction with and within the boundaries of such cemetery. And
Okay.
65?
66.
Crematory embalming facility means a building used for the cremation and or embalming. So you don't, this would allow a crematorium outside of a cemetery, or that's defining that it doesn't have to be tied to a cemetery.
But it doesn't include funeral services.
Right, it's just a place for the cremation and you go pick up the remains.
Okay, the way I read it, it's,
And here, under this definition, you can, at a cemetery, you can have a crematorium at the cemetery.
you can have,
Oh, based on the definition here,
you are permitted to.
including
Yeah,
the crematorium, mausoleum, whatever, mortuary as well.
okay,
So, but you, according to how I read, you can't have a standalone crematorium.
okay.
Does that allow
Where
for
that falls on the land
standalone-
use table, I don't know, but
Does it allow for a standalone funeral home then? It's not part of a cemetery?
I'd have to look, do we have a definition of a funeral home?
Yes.
Okay. And that would then tie back to the land use table.
Okay.
Okay.
There it is, 116.
Okay.
$69.
Destination-oriented development means a building or groups of buildings with facilities to accommodate the needs of residents, visitors, or tourists, with large portions of the site devoted to recreational opportunities. Ice rink,
Oh, I understand,
Yeah.
but there are other destination developments that are not recreational.
Mhm.
And I just wondered if that is, because a lot of times we'll say something, it's a destination rather than just go by and say, oh gee, I think I want to go in and look at dresses, but a destination would be like an insurance agent. You don't just drive by and see an insurance agent and think, oh, I think I'll drop in there.
I do it all the time.
Oh, you do? And so that was my concern.
I suppose one thing we'd have to look at, where else is this used in the code and how is it used? Perhaps this definition is not needed. I don't know. We'd have to see how it's infused in the code.
Okay, well, you might just put an asterisk.
Made a
and
note.
see. Thank you. Okay.
We do have a lot of definitions that don't have any other reference in the code. And that's also a problem. If we want to allow something that's in the definition or definitions or something, or we want to prohibit something, we actually need to follow through and put something in the code. The land use table, if you say it's prohibited across the board, that's fine. We're saying that that's not allowed in the city. If you want to allow it in certain zones, that's also helpful to know as well. And we can we'll obviously have more discussions later, but.
And you're saying we do have definitions that aren't reflected?
We
but are just here?
absolutely do. We got,
That's
a lot
one of them, I
actually.
think.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a bit surprised. We run across quite a few of those.
So if we were to create something like I'm looking through Spanish Fork as you scroll, I'm just scrolling through a couple other cities, and they've got stuff on communication towers and carports and so on and so forth. Does that mean we don't have any kind of, because we don't have those definitions here, we probably don't have any kind of code around those things?
No, sometimes we have things that are permitted uses in the code that don't have a definition. So that's another thing we have to clean up. Yeah. Yeah, code, it's a never-ending project.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll pass a section and not realizing we didn't add any definitions that go along with it. Sometimes we'll add a definition without any accompanying code to go with it. So it's a common problem, and I'll bet those codes you're looking at have the same problems. So
Yeah.
doesn't mean we can say, well, everybody else is making the same mistake and just leave it as it is. We got to go in and fix it. But yeah, it's kind of a never-ending project.
Kevin, are you suggesting that having definitions that don't have any links within the code it's not best practice? Or?
No, it's not.
And what problem does that
Argument
cause?
for a developer to come and say, well, this is a permitted use because you don't specifically prohibit it. So we definitely need to follow through and have something in the code that prohibits it. It's not a hard change. It's just you add a line in the land use table that just all the way across the row says it's prohibited or it's permitted in certain zones.
Should we in some way instruct staff to go and look at all the definitions and find any places where there aren't any?
Yeah, I would, for sure.
David?
Grown.
But it's really not.
What an intern's for, David.
That's right.
I think it's, some of these things, if you're just, oh, we absolutely don't want that in the city, that's good feedback too, because that would be an easy fix.
Well,
Now, determining where to allow that is a little more complicated, because then you have to talk about a lot of different things that go along with it, setbacks and height, building height, and things like that.
But there's some things we don't have in the city yet, but we will soon. Like, the destination-oriented businesses like a bowling alley. I mean, we'll have a bowling alley very soon too. So, I don't think you have to eliminate everything because if we know that we're going to have something that applies to it pretty soon.
Yeah, and a lot of those things that you think may fall under destination-oriented development may be actually covered under a different name.
Yeah.
I wasn't suggesting eliminating the definition. I was suggesting adding the definition somewhere within the zoning so that we know whether we permit it or not.
Well, that's why you typically look at the land use table, which I just did while we were discussing this, and that particular destination-oriented development is not in the residential or in the commercial table.
Right.
It's in the under recreation and.
It's made up of different uses, I guess you could say.
Do we have to have a motion in order to ask you guys to look at these? And
Was that a motion item, Kevin?
I don't think so. I mean, we got the consensus of the planning commission, so it's just a work session. Yeah.
maybe you guys could look at that.
I did notice we do have it in we have some language in the mixed waterfront zone where it says that one of the purposes is to create destination-oriented developments. So we do use it in another place in the code. So
Okay.
we just need to be careful. I'll bet you anything we added this mixed waterfront zone, not realizing that we had a definition earlier in 102 and perhaps we don't, or not 102, but 19, that's the Utah code, 190202. We may have not realized that we might have created a conflict between what we thought was would be a destination-oriented development versus what the definition is. Or maybe the history was we added that definition at that time. I don't know.
Oh, I'll bring up one that I am concerned about is short-term rentals. And we probably need a definition, but we also need to work on it in the code and take it to council.
Airbnb.
Airbnb. And, you know, you think, oh, there's none. You look up on Airbnb, and there are Airbnbs here and
Yeah, at some point, we made the decision to allow those, not allow them, but not prohibit them specifically, so.
look the other way then.
No, we had a discussion about it, and we were comfortable with continuing to allow those.
Laissez-faire,
Yeah.
hands off.
I just know that we've had a conversation at some point. As long as they didn't go past 30 days, we were fine with those.
Okay, I didn't know that. I missed that discussion.
Let your HOA restrict it.
And there was one there, too.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
They now have a lien on his property.
Well, okay. If we allow it, then we should have a definition for it. And something that says that we allow it. Would that make sense?
Or we
Is
go by
expressly
what he-
allowing it and turning the other cheek two different things?
Or we go by what our attorney has said, that if it's not in the code, then it's not necessarily prohibited, that it goes to the applicant, so you don't need to add it.
Enumerate everything.
Yeah.
So how does that then, that's one of the questions. I actually don't, I have very few questions on what's already in the code. Mine's just, what about this, what about this, what about this? And one of them was an Airbnb. So if we do allow it, how does it compare to like a home occupation then? You know, because there could be parking, there could be people coming in and out.
Well, yeah, home occupations have their own requirements. And so
Yeah, I know. So
we're-
should a house that is set up as an Airbnb be considered a home occupation? Because it may have rental cars coming into the, into the neighborhood and people coming in and out, and it could be as much as every other day, because a person only rents the house or a portion of the house every 2 days or something, and so it could be quite a bit of traffic in the area, and so that's why I wonder if we should consider that as a home occupation, or?
Yeah, you could. We can't prohibit them.
Right.
It looks like in state law, but certainly, yeah. I mean,
that's
there
just-
should be an opportunity to collect some revenue and get a business license, sure.
If
And-
it's a large business.
Yeah.
And the other thing is,
I think that would already be required in the code. It's very expansive what our definition of a business is. So, yeah, I think we've already got that, but, yeah, that's probably why we did, just thinking back when that decision was made, it was probably as a result of the state law, but.
okay, now, would they come under the same building department rules as ADU would?
Sure, yeah, I think they would, yeah, they'd have to comply with
Then-
ADA, and they'd have to have fire separation if there's kitchen facilities. They'd have to comply with all the building code requirements,
And
fire code requirements.
what about our requirements for a outside entrance and?
Are you talking about the accessory dwelling unit?
I'm talking about a short-term rental.
Well, yeah, Airbnb doesn't require a separate entrance and all that.
No, it's the house itself.
Yeah.
But we require it on, how do I want to put this? There's a building code. And we have some regulations on, they're pretty strict on those.
That's if you're going to rent out the basement. That's if you're renting out an accessory dwelling unit. But Airbnb is the whole house.
Or it could just be part,
House, but-
it could be part of the house.
Well, that
it's
would
any portion
that would
of it.
fall underneath the accessory dwelling unit then, wouldn't it?
That's
Because it's the
what I'm-
basement.
That's what I'm asking.
Or a room?
There's no requirement to have separate entrance or even the owner to not be in the house. You could be in the house too for Airbnb.
Short-time rentals can be the full house or a portion of it.
Yeah.
By state law, and we can't prohibit those from happening. Now, since we can't prohibit it, but we certainly can regulate it and require a lot of those things that we already do. We already require business licenses. We already require by the fire code and the building code, fire separation. If they're doing an Airbnb that's a basement and there's separate kitchen facilities, they have to comply with the fire separation rules. And of course, ADA has to be accessible. ADA is always going to require that. So, yeah, lots of good things to think about.
Question.
So it's one of those things that where we don't discuss it, we don't regulate it, but it's probably good to have some controls in there.
Yes.
Okay.
For the safety of the people who think they're safe. And
well,
And
At a
Commissioner
minimum-
Anderson said something earlier in the meeting. He said, are there some kind of guidelines that we look at as we're going through the code? I think one of them is we don't want to regulate every little thing if it already is covered in the code. And I also would like to avoid creating solutions for problems that don't exist yet.
I totally agree with that, but if Airbnb totally fits what a home occupation is, then why do some people have to apply for home occupation while others don't? Just based on what business they're doing. You know what I mean?
wonder, but one of them is covered under business law, I would think, which would be a home occupation. The other one is under real estate law, where you're giving up possession of your house for a fee.
No, because Airbnb doesn't require, Airbnb, the owner could be in the house and it could be just one bedroom.
Could.
So it's just like a home occupation where people are using it doesn't even have to have a separate entryway or separate anything. It's very much like a home occupation. So if that's the case, and there's impact to the neighborhood, then why do we not look at that at all when we do look at home occupation, which has sometimes even less traffic?
Not saying that I disagree with you,
Yeah.
but here's the one thing. If you put laws and rules about this, people are going to do it anyway. They're doing it right now.
Then why do home occupation?
Wow.
All I'm
of the
asking about
people.
is fairness.
Yeah.
Why do some people get a regulation at them while other people don't, even though they're doing really the exact same thing? That's all I'm saying.
It's an
Maybe something we
interesting
look at.
It's an interesting
And
point.
Yeah.
has the city thought, this brings up room tax. Has the city thought about that? Because that would be one way of mitigating any of the concerns that the city might have with some of these.
Well, there's no, I mean,
That's state law, yeah. That's
there's no
already in place.
definition for rental, let alone short-term rental.
Well, I was bringing up, maybe we should have, but if we don't,
I think it's another thing we can direct staff to take a look at.
On the list.
Kayla,
We're not gonna- I mean, we're not gonna
Kayla
define
had
Oh,
a
it here.
comment.
Just remember all those?
Food for thought for that. A home occupation has the 3 classes.
Right.
And if it is just a person going to stay for the night, it generally, in my mind, it wouldn't create more traffic than the 2 trips per day. That would be the class 1 home occupation. So they wouldn't be required to have a home occupation permit.
Yeah, it
So-
could be as simple as that, and we've looked at it and said, yeah, that's why it's no problem, and then it's fair, I think. But if we don't look at it and we just kind of ignore it, then it's not necessarily fair if maybe there is some kind of an issue.
Absolutely,
I think we
I
should just
agree.
take a look at it, that's
Yeah,
it.
Great.
Yeah.
Just a comment on your example of one room. There's nothing prohibiting, and we wouldn't be able to prohibit just rental of one room.
Right.
As long as they don't exceed our definition of family. Our definition of family is more than 4 unrelated people. So if they're just renting, I mean, you could rent your room right now as long as you're not exceeding that definition. You could have 3 different people, well, 4 unrelated people. It would depend on how many people are living in your house.
See, I have 6 bedrooms, and my kids are about to leave for college. That gives me 5 bedrooms that I could rent out
Good,
in my house
yeah.
alone. So, I think that's why we should at least look at it.
Well, then
So
you
I
want to
get-
look at the definition of family. It just says they're related.
No, you couldn't.
They don't even have to be related, I don't think.
We're all related.
4 unrelated people.
Or unrelated.
Oh,
Okay.
wait,
Or
we're all
unrelated
related.
people.
In fact, I'm related to my wife.
Yeah, so Ken, if
About-
there's two
about
in
11th
your
cousin.
house, if there's 2 in your house, Ken, you could rent to 2 more people. Because all 4 then are not related, that would be the maximum. So if you have a spouse, you 2, then you
Right,
could rent
right,
to
right.
2 more people.
Okay.
In theory.
That makes sense, okay, yeah.
Okay, we'll scroll through the next page.
75. Yeah, D's. No, we just got to E's. E's on the top.
So we are now to 90.
Equestrian Center.
It's page 11 out of
Yep. Approaching 100.
On the farm animals, how come it excludes mink? Are they some other type of animal not considered farm? Even though we have mink ranchers or farmers?
Rodents.
Do we know why that's?
Why mink are excluded?
Yeah.
I'm not a, I mean, if I had to venture to guess, I'd say probably the number and the odor. I mean, I realize you get odor from other things, but I know mink, you know, I purposely come to work and I cut off on 2300 for a reason.
Yeah, there's lots of posts on Lehigh Link about mink.
No idea why, and probably nobody was here when that was probably adopted, but my guess is, you know, a lot of mink escape too, and they're, you know.
I worked in a mink ranch. They are evil, vile creatures.
First-hand experience, so
yes.
That'd be my guess why.
When are we going to have a farmer's market? There's a definition we don't do around here.
I thought they did one during the summer.
Yeah, we
At Neptune Park.
Well,
Yeah.
give me the invitation, because I missed it.
I have a question on fence.
On fences, okay?
Yeah, on fences. Let's see, what did I say? Okay, so under fences, we have two definitions that excludes razor wire, but we have no definition for razor wire. So under, you know how there's those 4 paragraphs?
Yeah.
Two of them says no razor wire.
I think it probably goes back to, you know, how minute a detail are we going to regulate? I think razor wire is probably a common, when you hear razor wire.
Yeah, well,
Again, we got to look at it. Do we want to draw the, I mean, we could have a zoning code that's 5,000 pages.
no, I know, but if we're going to exclude something, shouldn't we define what we're excluding? Or is razor wire so common that it's understood? Because I didn't know what razor wire, I know concertina wire and barbed wire.
Yeah.
I didn't know what razor wire was.
Google it.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding that about just about everything. If it didn't have an exclusion, I wouldn't care. But because it was excluded, that's why I thought maybe there should be a definition. Just a point. Just a point.
This is my struggle with this. Like, I work for an organization that has 15 million parishioners around the church, or around the globe, right? And you can't, when you're writing or creating something for a global audience, you can't be all things, all people. So you have to put in some high-level principles, and you have to let them govern themselves, right? And I feel like, I mean, heck, we should have a definition for mink, shouldn't we? What's a mink? Or should we? You know what I mean? And so I guess that's my question is, when you have these questions like this, that's a fair question. You say, what's the lens? What are the principles here that we're going to hold up the question under and evaluate it? And that's where I guess maybe I'm been preconditioned to say less is more for us.
Yeah. I mean, you could read this code and you could say, well, we need to define all this stuff. I think it goes back to what would the average common person, if they had a fence example, there's a barbed wire fence, there's a chain link fence, there's a rail wire fence, which is which? I think.
So my question for Kevin, and he answered, he said, well, when in doubt, you probably want to spell it out. And I said, is there ever an advantage for us to not spell it out, where if there was a question, it comes back to us rather to the applicant?
If we don't spell it out, then it's either a lawsuit or we lose because it automatically goes to the property owner.
And I guess that's what I've learned tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the only reason I bring this up is because
Hold on.
That doesn't mean you need a 3,000-page code. You can just describe it generally and prohibit it. Then if someone wants to come in and they propose something, they can ask for a code amendment.
Okay.
So it's better to say it's prohibited than just leave it silent, because there will be that presumption that we have to get over, the presumption for the property owner, because we are zoning ordinances, and there's case law that talks about this. Zoning ordinances are in derogation of private property rights that are protected under the 5th and 14th Amendments of the Constitution. So that's why we have to say that it's prohibited and not just have some general clause in there that says if it's not said in the code, then it's prohibited.
Commissioner
Can we go
Kilgore?
back to?
Yeah, the only reason I brought,
Just a minute.
the only reason I brought it up is just because in the same paragraph, we prohibit it in 2 paragraphs without a definition, that's all. But if it's common knowledge what razor wire is, then I have no problem, I have no issue with it.
Before we go on to Commissioner Steele, I want to ask a question on fence. On D, for example, now, let's say that you have a 6-foot fence that's allowed, that's semi-private. 30% of it needs to be visible. What if you only build a 4-foot fence? Then, by definition, 2 feet of that are completely open, and the other part is opaque.
It's the total. We look at when I've measured fences, I look at the panel section. I don't include the posts, but I look at the panel section between the posts to say, okay, what's the square footage there? How much of it is open? How much of it is opaque?
But if it's a 4-foot fence and you're allowed to have 6, because you could do a 4-foot fence that's opaque, and the other 2 that has the
we'd still be regulating the overall height of the fence, so it'd still be a 6-foot fence.
No, what I'm saying is, instead of building the 6-foot fence, if an owner decides to build a 4-foot fence that is completely opaque, it still leaves 2 feet open completely that they didn't build, that they could have, and so therefore, it's semi-private.
Well, that part of the fence doesn't exist. It's not there.
See, that's why I think this code is kind of messed up. But that should be revisited.
6 foot
If
the
you're
maximum?
allowed to have a 6-foot fence and you only build 4, then you already let 30% of that become open.
It's regulating what you build.
See, that's
If
ridiculous.
you choose not to build 6, then you choose not to build 6.
I think that's, your comment is ridiculous.
You can.
Yeah, if it's not built, then you can't probably. I mean,
Can't regulate something that's
can't
not there.
regulate it.
No, what I'm saying is you are building a 4-foot fence where you could build 6.
30% only.
And if you're serving the purpose of it being semi-private in an open way, for example, the purpose of having a semi-private fence along an open pathway was to keep the person safe that's going down the pathway.
Security.
So, yes, for security. If you do build a 4-foot fence, you're going to be able to see them. The security has been checked off. That's done.
But 6 foot's the maximum, right?
That's 100% of an opaque
6 is the
4-foot
maximum,
fence.
but you only build 4. Then you've already left 30% of it, 33% off.
It's 100% opaque.
Yeah.
If you only built a 4-foot fence and it's,
That it's opaque, you've left 2 feet open that's completely
but
visible.
that's 2 feet, that's 2 feet of fence that's not there. You can't assume that fence is semi-private if
4-foot
that fence
fence.
isn't there.
I'm just gonna
I
disagree
understand
with
where you're
that.
coming from, but I
cars,
don't see how you can regulate something that's not there.
So, now, here's another thing. So here's your alternative. You have somebody who builds the 4-foot fence that is opaque, and then they have a lattice on the top that's 2 feet. Okay, it costs a little bit more money, but they've done a 6-foot fence, and they're okay with the 30%.
Yeah.
By definition. But what if they don't want to do the other 2 feet? They want to leave it
And it's
open.
only a 4-foot fence.
Then we regulate the size they put in.
Only a 4-foot fence.
That's ridiculous.
You can't, I mean,
Did somebody come and knock on your door, tell you your fence is wrong?
I've seen them in our neighborhood. That's what I'm saying.
that's like me saying I have an 8-foot fence, it's only 4 feet of
You
it's
can't have an
opaque.
8-foot fence in Saratoga Springs.
Yes.
Yes, you can.
Can.
Not
Just 4
not in your
No.
residence. You can have
You can.
6.
I have an 8-foot.
Planning director
Or
can
a
approve up to 8
20-foot fence. I have a
feet.
You have an 8-foot fence?
I do.
Planning director can approve up to 8 feet.
Really?
Yeah.
Let's talk.
No, it's because
I
of the
think we're
way it
gonna-
was graded. And if we hadn't put in an 8-foot fence, the neighbor could have stood and hung his head all the way over and probably picked beans if we'd had beans there. And so you. saw
Okay,
the
we'll
way
take
it
this
was
one
graded.
offline.
I have a question on festival. What's up? Does festival include carnivals that have temporary amusement rides because those are mechanical, whereas this festival says not including mechanical rides?
Well,
Or not
here it says it's a not-for-profit. I would think most, your carnival, your City of Fun shows, the place that go around the various city festivals, those are for-profit business.
Okay, so then what about then what about carnival type of things then? Because there's nothing in there in the code about for-profit with mechanical.
Go to 54, because that's the one I wanted to go back to, and I think this might cover it.
Is it? Okay.
But again, we may need to, okay, commercial recreation. And can somebody tell me what's the difference between an amusement center and an amusement park?
Oh, okay.
Because neither one are defined.
Well, I think your Fat Cats would be an amusement center.
But, I mean, that to me is, you know, okay, it's subjective. I mean.
Right. And a lot of times if an applicant comes in, they say, I want to do this, and we say, okay, this is our interpretation of this definition. They can go with that. They can challenge that. They can appeal staff's interpretation of the code. Everyone has the right to do that. It happens every now and then. I've experienced it a few times. It's up to them. So yeah, there is going to be some level of interpretation on anything.
Should we, but this is a case that it looks like to me we ought to define amusement center, which would help with, in the amusement park, and it might be, as you say, a traveling carnival, where does that go in?
Well, and also with the festival one, I was wondering why it is so specific about nonprofit without mechanical equipment. I was just wondering why it's so specific. Is there like a certain thing? Because if it is a nonprofit with mechanical equipment, then does that like break a law, or is there a reason why it was so specific? And if it's really broad, like on this one, then it's okay. I'm not sure where amusement parks right now, the kind I'm thinking of, a carnival type of thing, right, where that fits in the city. Is it allowed or not allowed? I guess that's what I don't get. And maybe this definition says it's broad enough to allow it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, commercial recreation would be an amusement park.
It would be? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, like a carnival.
Right.
With the rides.
I mean,
and
you ask somebody, what's an amusement park? Disney, 6, 7 Flags, whatever. Those are amusement parks, I think, what most people think of when they hear that.
Okay.
Again, it goes back to, there's going to be some interpretation. Again, we can't define every single word in here. Okay,
yeah,
something has to be blue. Okay,
no, I know.
Let's define
I'm
blue.
not looking for, it's just that when we have a specific definition for that applies to nonprofit without mechanical equipment, then that begs the question, then what if you are not a nonprofit with mechanical equipment? So that's the only reason why I bring it up, because we have something so specific that says this is not what we're talking about, and so then what, if it wasn't so specific, I would leave it up to interpretation, but it was so specific.
See, when I read festival, including bazaars and fairs, I think of, you get a lot of craft fairs, especially when the fall comes around.
Right.
That's what I would think would be the definition of 102.
Okay.
Something like that.
Well, I'm going to go back to amusement center versus amusement park. And I can't pull up both at the same time easily on this. But what does our use table say?
Or what?
It says nothing. We don't show those amusement centers or amusement parks in the definitions. So, or the general commercial. Was it commercial recreation? Was that the definition?
Commercial recreation, yes. It's not in the...
Commercial recreation is in the table.
Okay, so it says, then if somebody wanted to put in an amusement center, not Fat Cats, but somewhere else, we don't have any, we don't have a definition for it, and it's not spelled out in our use table.
Yeah, I think in that instance, if somebody comes in and says, I want to do this, then at that point, we'd say, okay, let's look at, can it fit anywhere in the code? We thoroughly search the code. Well, does it fit under anything? No. Then the next step, I think, is, okay, then we need a text amendment. I don't think you want to, again, we could think of every conceivable possibility that someone could come in. You just can't do that.
But, okay, so if somebody wanted to come in and say, I want to set up a carnival, for something, Saratoga Springs Day, what part of the code do they look at, or what would you look at to see whether it was acceptable or not? The fact that we have no prohibition against it is okay.
To see, can we define it anywhere? If we can't define it, then
So in the code, where would you define it? Would you define it under the amusement park thing? I mean,
A commercial,
yeah, is that where you would, because we're specific about if you're a nonprofit, without, then whatever. But then everything else, there's nothing there, except for maybe this paragraph that Commissioner Steele brought up.
I mean, you read that definition, that it kind of doesn't hint towards that type of use because it specifies racket clubs, health facilities.
Yeah, exactly.
But not.
But as an amusement, okay, I guess it's a portable amusement park, you could call it that. So in this case, yeah, it'd probably fall under commercial recreation.
I just can't understand why why it's even in there, amusement park versus amusement center. It just doesn't, to me, that, if you're not going to define them, then to me, to not include amusement center, to me, ought to be struck.
Yeah, we don't define what an amusement center is. But again, it goes back to at what point do we say, do we have to define everything now?
Right, but is it in the matrix?
Amusement center? No.
Then that's, Kevin, weigh in.
Isn't amusement?
Yeah, more clarity is always good.
I mean, we're talking about amusement centers, but what was the other definition we talked about earlier today, that Fat Cats would, a destination recreation center?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, a destination recreation center would encompass Fat Cats or a bounce house place or.
Right, and all I'm saying is having been out there and trying to find all the loopholes, that one would be one that I would have a ball with.
Well, I mean, I still go back to Commissioner Kilgore and whatever was the last example, the razor wire.
Yeah.
And if you're prohibiting razor wire and you're listing all these other fence types, I could see it perfectly reasonable that you would define razor wire as something that's strictly prohibited. Because then it's the argument over, is this common knowledge or is this perception or is razor wire different in different parts of the country?
Is it a brand name?
Or,
Yeah.
and so, I mean, if we're saying amusement parks, but not including amusement centers, then it seems reasonable to have a definition of those things that are specifically called out, in my mind.
And to me, maybe amusement center is not needed. If we don't have it in the matrix, then why, but not including amusement centers, and we don't have any place for an amusement center, except as.
See, in amusement center, we have commercial recreation.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, just on the surface, those seem to be okay. Couldn't those be the same thing?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That one needs to be looked at. Put an
Yeah.
asterisk by it.
So, I mean, we could potentially just strike out amusement centers because, maybe it's not needed.
Well, and if
the planning commission is debating all this, these are things that developers are going to latch onto. So.
Yeah, so if I did want to have a carnival for Saratoga Splash Days and I came to the planning staff, where do you look to see that it's permissible? Like they want to set up Neptune Park with all these rides and everything.
Well, yeah, and it may just default. We'd have to look at our temporary uses too. I mean, the temporary use ordinance may be, fairly open to allow things like that. I'd have to get into it. I can't quote off the top of my head, but there could be some other areas of the code where things like that are permitted.
David, would you also, as you have the asterisks next to 54, evaluate whether the destination recreation thing is a redundant definition with commercial recreation?
Okay, destination-oriented development versus commercial recreation.
Versus amusement centers, all three of those.
And I've got a note for amusement centers in 54.
That's a good example. Retailers don't have a standardized.
Both I already did the farm animals.
We're now at 100,
fence.
so I hope you guys are following along with in the interest of convenience.
I don't have anything till 164.
Let's just pass by fitness center.
Does anybody have anything from 100 to 150? Nope. 150 to 200?
Nope. I have 164.
164?
164 it is.
Lot width?
The corner lot. A.
Okay. Lot width. In the case of a corner lot, means the width of the lot as measured along both street frontages at the required setback. So that makes it sound like you have to measure both, and that gives you a lot, which is not the case. We would take that and say, because on a corner lot, you could have two different places you put the front of the house. So we would say, whatever one, if one of those measurements meets the width, great, it meets the width. But yeah,
That needs to be
I
worked on.
can see how that could be cleared up there.
Yes, I thought I had written down a definition, but I guess I didn't on that one.
Okay. 165 to 175?
180,
Do I hear 180?
motel.
Motel means a building or group of detached or connected buildings designed or used primarily for providing sleeping accommodations for automobile travelers and having a parking space adjacent to a sleeping room, which includes automobile courts, tourist courts with more than one building, and motor lodges.
I'm just thinking that may be a little outdated.
Kind of reads that way. But, you know,
Out of the 50s, maybe?
do we define hotel?
Yeah, hotel is defined. I looked for both. Hotel.
Is defined?
Yeah, it's in there. I found them both. So I wanted to know.
Means a building and guest room which is allowed for private.
Yeah, you park your car by the door.
You're right, yeah.
See, I mean, by that, you know, you traditionally think of a motel, single story, you pull right up to where your door is, you access the door from the outside. That's the traditional what you think of as a motel, you know.
Not necessarily a single story, though. I mean, it's just
Right,
doors
right.
facing out.
Doesn't have to be. But if you read the definition of hotel, that would cover anything that would be defined as a motel, so.
Hotel, motel.
So Best Western is technically a motel?
Motel, yeah,
Is it facing out and you drive right up?
yeah.
Interesting.
But some Best Westerns are actually
Hotels.
Some are.
hotels.
Motel,
You know,
hotel.
Like a Red Roof Inn, those are typically traditionally doors.
No,
facing
we could even make that definition as hotel/motel, keep it as one.
Oh, that'd be good.
I doubt there's a traditional motel, you know, market now. You know, most of them are multi-story. Obviously, you go up, you take advantage of square footage.
It's rare you can park your car outside
Yeah.
your room.
You'd be lucky to get that.
So you asterisk that one, David, as a potential
Yeah,
combined?
I've got hotel,
Yeah, especially
motel.
there's a developer who's thinking of building either a hotel or motel, so that'd be good.
Okay, and then my next one is 192. Anybody else?
Villas.
What's that? What's that?
192.
Open space.
Okay, and this is one that, it just brought to mind something, and I think Kevin doesn't like for us to be too specific about this, but somewhere we should have a minimum for open space. We've got it in mixed waterfront. And I thought about putting it, you know, maybe it should go in the open space, but I don't know that Kevin would like that. But the definition in mixed waterfront is 150 square feet with a minimum of a width of 10 feet. And that was defined in the mixed waterfront, but it's not gotten into the other areas. So if somebody's trying to take little bitty swaths, we don't have anything to stand on.
Yeah, I mean, that 10 feet by, well, it'd be 15 then if it's a minimum of 150.
Yeah.
That's smaller than a car parking stall.
Yeah, but that's still, I mean, it gives us something to, you've got to be at least 10 feet wide.
Mm-hmm. So you want to put a dimension in the definition.
And maybe that's not the one we want, but that's the one that's already in the mixed waterfront. Just saying.
It's definitely something to think about. I wonder if it'd be a concern though, if it's not usable and they don't have recreational amenities, they don't get the required points. There's the two parts of the open space requirement, the land dedication, and then the points requirement. They may not qualify for those points if it's not enough property. So, I don't know, you got to be careful, I guess, when you get overly restrictive, because then staff doesn't have as much flexibility to work with, and we're coming and asking you for code amendments, and
Well,
it's definitely something that we should look into.
yeah. I mean, that's not a very big minimum,
No,
if you think about it.
it's not.
It's not over restrictive, but at least you've got something to say,
Yeah.
Okay, 193.45. Who's got the next number? Just speak up.
I'm in the 250s.
I have a 248, 249.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah. 302, 306, whatever.
248 then.
How come course is not in there? It's a riding arena. I know what riding and roping is, but how come horse isn't mentioned in either of those? Do we not need to mention it? I'm just curious.
Why do we not mention horses?
Yeah. Is it?
I'm not a horse person, but if somebody asks me, what do you do in a riding arena? I tell you, ride a horse.
Okay, that's
You're not a bull.
I ride at that spot.
Ostriches.
yeah. Well, bikes. You
Just
could
Family
say,
Robinson style.
Or we
you
could
ride a
keep-
motorcycle and rope a calf.
There's mutton busting.
Why not?
They have sheep, little kids.
Clowns.
Yeah, I mean, talks of roping and riding, that's obviously deals with equestrian uses.
Obvious.
It's obvious.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
I'm fine with that. I'm
If
just
a developer
was
could say, I
curious.
want to do a riding arena, great, here's how we define it.
I've
You
seen
know,
it
it's
done
for horses.
on ostriches.
I really
Ostriches?
wonder why we have two that say the very same thing for commercial and private. They say, the only thing that's, words that are different are private and commercial. To me, that looked like it could go into one.
Well, probably because we'll define where they can be in the land use table. They can, different zones. You can do
Oh,
private and
okay.
commercial. Like, I mean, if you've got, 5 acres, you can certainly do your own private riding arena.
Yeah.
But it can't do it, most likely can't do a commercial without looking at the table, but I assume that's what it would be.
Okay.
So does that riding arena private fall into the land use somewhere then?
It's got to be agricultural.
Is it only allowed in certain zones?
Looking right now.
Could put a real small one.
Turn your
Yeah,
horse
riding
around.
arena, commercial is a conditional use permit in the, get my notes here. Conditional use in the ag, RA5 and RR zone, where riding arena private is permitted in those same 3 zones. Next number?
Okay, so in 265, sexually oriented businesses, you actually define it as by saying is defined in 19.23.02. It seems that that's backwards, that you should define it here and then,
I think it's probably makes that reference. Kevin, is that because it comes right out of the state code? When we do our SOB ordinance, is that state standards we've adopted, do you know?
I'm just,
No, I think so. I've been here 8 years, so.
even if, I mean, if it's defined by state code, that's fine. I just think if you're going to define it, you should define it here, not some other title.
What number is it?
19.23.02.
Oh, in this.
Oh, it's 265. So that's just something to look into. And
Well,
then-
so the thing is, we've got, if you go to that section, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different definitions that really wouldn't make sense outside the context of that section or that chapter on sexually oriented businesses. So it's not bad practice to have definitions later on. Like, for instance, the planned community zone, we have definitions that only apply to that chapter.
Okay,
So
great.
I think we're okay there. Yeah.
Great.
In most cases, you're 100% correct, but where we're very specific in just one chapter to a subject matter, the definitions probably should be in that chapter.
And then the other one for this is we define local road, collector, arterial, but there's no definition for street hierarchy, which is the context for those other things. And just something to consider maybe is to define street hierarchy.
As far as an SOB?
Well, I mean, you define collector as,
Which definition are we looking at here now?
well, there's no definition.
Oh,
And you define arterial and you define local roads as they,
those would
connect, but
fall
there's-
under the engineering standards the adopted standards would be contained in there.
But I guess what I'm saying is we define each of those terms, but there's no context on how they relate. And the street hierarchy is how they relate, right? Those principles. And so you go from local to collector to arterial to, you know, highway or whatever.
And without
so
Gordon.
just something else to consider.
Yeah.
E-fix would be to default to the engineering standards, right? Let's just do that.
Yeah.
So Dave, you can fix it. Would that address your concern?
Well, I don't know
Because
if it's
we're very
even,
specific in
it's
the
just
engineering
a,
standards.
it's just a, it's not even a concern, it's just a, yeah, I mean, it's just a comment, it's just something I noticed as I was
Yeah.
looking at those definitions, we define them. An arterial is connecting a local to a, you know, higher use traffic, but.
And we also use those terms later in the code, which brings up the potential for conflicts between this and the engineering standards. So, yeah,
I mean, our
we need to
master
fix that.
transportation plan references street hierarchy a ton, but that's not code, right?
It is code.
It is code.
Yeah, our engineering standards are adopted through ordinance, and if you look at the state code definition of land use ordinance, it's very broad and includes any development standard, which could include, well, actually does include engineering standards. So,
I mean, if
in
that's the
fact, the
case, then-
legislature last year requires us now to adopt it as if it were a land use ordinance.
Okay.
We've been doing that for 4 or 5 years. That's how it usually works here, is we are ahead of everyone, including the legislature, on a lot of these things. And I think that a lot of credit, staff deserves a lot of credit for that, because changes have come, and I've been asked to make changes that have been really, I think, helpful for our development community. Like, for instance, our warranty bond language. A lot of cities were requiring 50% warranty bonds. We only required 10%. Legislature came in and imposed that as a mandate. Anyway, engineering standards, we've been adopting those by ordinance for a long time, but.
Do you just want to see some referencing streets, but then we could say, see engineering specifications? Instead of trying to define the streets in here, because it's more of a engineering function, not a zoning function.
Yeah, I think that would be more clear.
The easy thing to do is just say collector's street means a street as defined in the engineering standards.
Yeah.
Yeah, engineering technical specifications and drawings manual.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. Next number. So we have eight minutes more, so let's start throwing out some numbers.
Who's got the next number?
It's at 299. Exactly.
I have one that I think we probably ought to put in, and I'm taking it from APA. A live-work dwelling, because we already have that in the mixed waterfront. And it's a dwelling unit used for both dwelling purposes and any non-residential use permitted in the zoning district in which the unit is located, provided that not more than 2 persons who do not reside in the unit are employed on the premises. And we could, that's a starting point.
We define dwelling, live, work. We have that in the definitions.
Oh, okay, I looked and I didn't see it.
Means number 81 means a dwelling unit designed to be used jointly for commercial and residential purposes, not including home occupations.
Okay. And we haven't put a limit of employees, have we?
I don't know. I don't believe so.
With parking situation, we might, you might want to take a look at the APA. Somehow I missed that.
So I have a bunch of ones that just as comments or wondering if this is something that should go in. And I know we don't want to expand too much, but I was just wondering things like tiny homes and houses. Is that something?
Well, I mean, I don't think we need to, because we already have the minimum house sizes in the zone anyway, and tiny homes are less than that, so there's probably no need to define it because a tiny home would not meet our zone's minimum square footages.
Okay.
Does that go into ADU?
How about, what's that?
Does that go into an accessory dwelling unit?
Not necessarily, because,
Accessory will have its own standards.
yeah.
Might be a primary, if that's what you're saying.
Yeah, because people could buy entire lots now that are
Right.
made just for tiny
Right.
homes. Okay, how about graffiti? I brought this up a time before, but graffiti versus art, you know, and sometimes you can't tell the difference.
That's a slippery slope because
Yeah, so maybe it's not
to the
something we do.
graffiti, they're called graffiti artists. I mean,
Right.
we may not agree with what they look like, but there's going back to my college days, we had quizzes, and, the professors, does this qualify as art? And, on the outside, things we'd probably say no, but if there's a creative process involved.
It's hard, and
Yeah.
I mean, like in American Fork, there's a tattoo parlor that has great graffiti art on the wall. That's fine.
Yeah.
But what if someone does just do graffiti and say, "Hey, that's an art"? Can the city have any way to say no, that's not?
Do you mean regulate content?
Yeah. See, that's maybe it's not something we want to get into, but anyway, that's
Slippery
something-
slope.
Yeah, it is. How about small cell wireless towers?
We already have the code for that. That's
Yeah, I was thinking a reference to that, or kind of like what we're talking about with the other ones, or is that not necessary? Thing?
Didn't we define those, Kevin?
We default to state code. That's an area where state code preempts what we do.
Okay.
And if we were to basically copy and paste their definition into our code, that creates a cleanup and an administrative burden. When the state changes their code, we have to go in and fix ours.
Okay.
So
No problem.
we don't want to have to play that catch-up game.
Okay. And then how about dark sky ordinance? We talk about a lot of dark sky ordinances having to be met by developers, but I don't see a place where I could read the dark sky ordinance.
Right, and I mean,
I'm not saying the definition necessarily, but just a reference to where you could find that.
Just so reference to our lighting code, basically, is what you're saying.
Is that, yeah, oh, is it in the code?
Our lighting code goes where our standards are contained.
Okay.
We don't have a dark sky ordinance by that name specifically. It just is the lighting code that we have, the
I see.
standards we have in there of cutoff lights, that sort of thing, no up lighting.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Unless you're in a community plan.
Okay. How about a reference for clear sight triangle?
Yeah, it's in the engineering specs.
He's just asking if we can put a definition in there.
No,
So
I'm not
reference
even
it.
saying we should, I'm just wondering,
an
I'm just
index.
making a comment, yeah, just a question. Okay, so that's already
Yeah.
available, okay. And then when I first started, you see definitions for the, what is it, equivalent residential
ERUs.
use, yeah, the ERU, but not for FAR, the floor area ratio, and yet that's in all kinds of stuff.
Floor area ratio is only talked about in the DAP.
That's the only place we have to worry about it?
The standard zones outside the DAP don't reference floor area ratio.
Oh, okay. I
Some
must have
cities
just
will do
read a
that
lot of
as a zoning function to say you have to have a floor area ratio of X, Y, Z in this zone. We don't do floor area ratio.
Okay. And then what about a reference for Prop 6? That's something that we talk about a lot, especially when we have public comment.
Yeah.
But even when I look on the city website, there's a Prop 6. There's a tab, or I mean,
Right. There's a link to a document.
But
Kevin
what it
has
talks about is not Prop 6, but the other thing, something else about it, the rights or something. Oh, no, vested rights. It doesn't actually talk about Prop 6 itself. So where do you find Prop 6? Especially because there's a lot of...
Let's back up a little bit. Prop 6.
Yeah. Or the law that...
Prop 6.
Yeah.
That was the number of the proposition that the
Right.
Lieutenant Governor's office has signed, meaning that year there were 5 other propositions in other cities that came before the city's Prop 6. It really doesn't have any like we don't refer to that as like an ordinance of the city because it's not. The general plan includes a Proposition 6 language, which is what Proposition 6 was doing, was changing the general plan. The general plan has language that discusses the requirements for the number of unit types, single family, multifamily, et cetera. So there's really not any place to reference Prop 6 because that's not an actual thing It's just simply the proposition that year that the Lieutenant Governor's office assigned.
Yeah, and so, in fact, that's a good point, and I guess somewhere in the back of my mind I knew that. But when we have a lot of public input, and we know that a lot of them are mistaken because they think that it regulates density, but it doesn't, you know, it's more about multifamily housing and stuff, then where can they go to, so that we don't have to explain it to them all the time? Maybe it's not in the definition area, but at least, you know, like a reference or something, because someone wants to look it up and see where it is in our code, and people have in their mind that it's Prop 6. It even says on the website, our website, Prop 6 vesting rights, you know, and the content itself doesn't talk about that. I mean, doesn't talk about Prop 6 itself, but what the city interpretation of was. So again, if you're trying to look for it, and we have a lot of people who ask about it, where do we send them? I mean, if there's not a definition or a reference, I guess that's my thing. Is trying to get rid of the confusion.
I think David and I can work on fixing the website so it's more clearly referenced there.
Okay, all right.
But it's not here in the definitions or Title 19. That's not the place to reference it.
Okay. What's that?
David, can we work with David Johnson on that too?
Yep.
Okay.
Sorry. Actually, I have more, but we're out of time. So.
Okay.
We did what we thought we couldn't do.
All right, item number 6, approval of minutes. I'll entertain a motion.
What meeting was it?
I move to approve the minutes for Planning Commission for whatever the date.
February 28th.
February 28th, 2019.
A
Second.
motion? We have a second. Commissioner Card. Any question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Wait, is this the second time we've all been here? Were we all here last time?
We were all here last time.
I think that might be a record.
Commission comments.
That might be a record.
Director's report.
No report tonight.
What have we got coming up?
That's what I was just going to reference if you wanted to know, and I got sidetracked here.
I don't think we have any public hearings because I didn't get noticed.
Let's see. Just in the last week, we had a Jacobs Rant plat come in, a few Wildflower plats, Jordan Promenade plats, the Beacon Point Founders Plat A and final plat came in. Still working on a Silver Bear Swim School concept plan, and we did get a North Shore Phase 1 final plat in. That's just for the DRC for the last week.
What about Markham?
Markham, they have red lines right now. They're probably, I would suspect they're going to give those back. They've sent me a few pages. I'm like, you need to bring it all in one package. So that their various contractors are working on it. I suspect Noah and Meg will probably get it to me tomorrow. We're certainly going to try and get it on for the next Planning Commission.
Okay.
I think their corrections are not anything major. So that's my goal, is to get it for the next PC.
Okay.
What is that?
Markham Dental.
Dental.
All right, without objection, we adjourn.
Next time we go to the other big one.